Good morning. My name is Patricia Hutchinson. I'm with the Arizona Geographic Alliance. And maybe you've heard my voice before, so I will say I'm also from Cottonwood, Arizona, where I teach in the middle school. This is a third grade lesson designed for 2 class periods. And it's called Ellis Island, Entry to Opportunity. And this is a really wonderful picture of Ellis Island before it was extended out using fill material. The overview for this lesson is from 1892 to 1924. More than 12 million individuals passed through Ellis Island. It has been estimated that nearly half of all Americans today can trace their family history to someone who passed through the port of New York at Ellis Island. And the purpose in this lesson, students will learn about the history of Ellis Island and about American attitudes towards immigration. Students will look at their own family history and where they fit into the patterns of American immigration. The materials needed would be rulers and colored pencils, graph paper. I believe I put some graph paper with the lesson, but if not, it's always available in schools. An official Ellis Island research project form, Ellis Island PowerPoint, fact sheet, and immigration data and graph. The objectives for this lesson that the student will be able to describe why Ellis Island is considered an important American symbol. They will also construct a demographic graph from their own primary sources of classroom family immigration. And they will complete a simple research interview. Just a note, not all ancestors came through Ellis Island. A lot of Asian, supposedly Chinese and Japanese, came through Angel Island because of restrictive laws. We have people migrating down from Canada and mostly in Arizona, migrating up from Mexico. So you're not excluded if you didn't have someone come through Ellis Island. Well, honestly, I've been to Ellis Island 9 times, and I have yet to find anyone in my family who's come through there. So, it's worth a look. Students should have some experience with making a bar graph. And by third grade, with the Common Standards, Common Core, they will have done this. Procedures in Lesson 1. Begin the lesson by asking the class if they've ever heard of Ellis Island. They probably haven't. Explain that Ellis Island is an important symbol of the United States, that it's a symbol of our belief in the rights and values of humans. It is also a symbol of how America welcomes immigrants who have made America the multicultural nation that it is. And ask for a show of hands, and this is where did your ancestors come from some other country? Going to have a lot of Irish, a lot of German, and this will bear itself out in the graphs, depending on where you teach. And there'll be other parts of the country where you have large populations of East Africans anymore in Minnesota. So depends on where this lesson is being done. Explain that the class will be doing a simple research project to find out the countries of origin of the students in the class. This information will then be turned into a bar graph that will reflect this data. And there is an Ellis Island PowerPoint. For some reason it's not coming up in here. The pictures can be printed, and if not, they're also being saved to an external source so that you have access to them. But I would like students to discuss the images. They have preconceived ideas, I think, of what an immigrant might look like. And I picked a variety of images, but they can look for differences in clothing and hairstyles, etc. But otherwise, it looks like them. They might even say, oh, that looks like someone in my family. Makes the idea of an immigrant, I think, more personal, especially to a third grader. And this would be where the families would be. There's about 6 families, and I hope you can access that information. Share the graph that's been constructed from U.S. immigration data. According to the graph, where do most Americans come from? And that would be Germany. Where have the fewest immigrants come from? And that would be Africa. Are there any countries on the list that they've never heard of? Possibly. Locate the countries on a world map or a globe if you have one. The countries are probably not as diverse. When I looked this up, I actually used data that did include Angels Island and some of the smaller ports like Galveston, places like that. Pass out the Ellis Island Research Form. And this is a form that I created that the students can take home. It's written at their written and appropriate for their age level. And it just shows that they're an Ellis Island researcher and that they're going to ask their questions, their family questions about country or countries of origin. They're going to sign their name and they're going to return it to school the next morning. Real simple research project. At that point, they're going to share their countries of origin. We're going to write the countries on the board, and we're going to use counting marks to keep track of the number of families from each country. Now, it's also possible that you have children who have been adopted or who are living with family members. And in those instances, just use your discretion and keep them part of the group. Make them comfortable. Have students organize the data so that it can be interpreted. The greatest number of immigrants to the least, or vice versa. Show yesterday's U.S. immigration graph to the class. Help the students decide what unit of measurement will be used on the graph paper. Are we talking about feet, inches? Are we talking about hundreds, tens, millions? What would work for our classroom? Then determine the width of each bar. The more different countries, the smaller the bars will be, with a half-inch being the smallest bar possible. Then have them decide what labels should be used for the x-axis and the y-axis. Perhaps model making several bars with the students. That would be guided practice. Explain how the graph assignment will be graded. Answer any questions that students might have. Pass out the graph paper. Remind students to make sure that each bar on the graph is labeled with country names, the number of immigrants, measurement units, and a title. And then when the students are done, share the fact sheet, the timeline of immigration. This can be done through reading the information to the students or by using the following Dippity timeline. You'll see in green it shows Dippity.com. I made this up. It's in my name. I'm GeoMom. But it's an immigration timeline of Ellis Island, and it's kind of a cool program. It's a commercial program. There's some ads on it, but it's a good program because it's interactive. I added photos, and it's always nice to have more than one way of presentation. Kids are pretty media conscious, so give them some media. Have students identify reasons why people would come to the United States. Why would they have come at the time of Ellis Island? Why would they come today? List the reasons on the whiteboard. And then for assessing this lesson, for mathematics and writing, the graph will be scored as followed. It has a title, country names, numerical counts, it'll get 10 points. If the graph is accurate, it gets 30 points, and with neatness, another 20 points. Math and geography mastery will be considered 80% or higher of the total points. And for social studies, in a sentence, students will give one reason: famine, political discord, religious persecution, economic opportunity, maybe family already here, chain migration. They won't know that term, but it's chain migration. Why people leave their homelands and come to the U.S. And in the second sentence, they will describe how Ellis Island symbolizes a value or symbolizes American democracy. It's a home for immigrants, a place of safety, beginning of a new life, a chance to be free. Basically, you want them, and they're certainly welcome to bring any prior knowledge they already have. Bring it to the lesson. It doesn't have to be strictly these choices. And extensions. Have students map the locations from which their classmates' families have originated on a world map. And I believe there's a copy of a world map attached to the lesson. Sources, I used History of Ellis Island. And using photo sources, even using the Library of Congress, sometimes those are still copyright. So I work very carefully to get copyright-free photos so that you're certainly welcome to use them in your classroom. And I believe that's it. Except for this very long piece of information on copyrights. It's always good to have lots of copyright information. Thank you.